Believe, then act, then see God move. That's what the definition of faith is. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things that are not seen. What do we want to do? Many times we want to say, God, if you will move, then I'll believe, then I will act. And that's not the ordering here. The ordering is you believe first, then you take action, then you see me move.
This is Breaking Barriers, where we help pastors and churches grow so that they can go.
All right. Hey, guys. Welcome to the Breaking Barriers podcast. My name is Pastor Andrew Hopper, and today we're going to talk about a very important topic of how courage and God's faithfulness in terms of his presence, producing courage in our life, ends up helping us truly break through many of the barriers that might be right in front of us. I know in my own personal leadership, my time at Mercy Hill, and I know that this is true just generally in leadership, many times we are going to lead up to the point of deciding that the next step is going to be too painful. I don't have the courage. I'm afraid. Whatever it is, those things end up producing sort of artificial barriers for us. And I think that in Exodus chapter 4, we have a really good paradigm to go to, because many times the fear and excuses, the negativity that begins to come up in our mind is pretty much as Paul says, it's common to man. I mean, really, our excuses many times end up in just a few buckets. The negativity ends up in just a few buckets. Some of the fears that we have end up in just a few buckets that keep our feet stationary rather than moving forward, breaking through barriers, going up the mountain. I think this is just true in life, guys. There are a few, when you think about strengths finders, for example, there are a few positive Patties that are in the world, okay? I mean, people that are just wired to see the glass half full, to realize why we can. We're always thinking about, man, we can push through the next wall. But many of us, I would say probably most of us by definition, in terms of just when you think about something like a strengths finders, how rare it is to have like a positivity in your top 5 strengths, for example. Most of us, therefore, when we come up against a wall that we don't know exactly how to push through, when God's calling us to something that we feel a little fearful in, many times instead of just kind of that hoorah attitude, man, we're going to go get it, let's go, it's our mind becomes a bit of a factory of fear, negativity, and excuses. And if we are going to break through those excuses and that fear and that negativity, what I want to argue for today is it's going to take more than just sort of the self-help deep dive, dig deeper, find something within yourself. Instead, we're going to need to remember and see the character of God, the presence of God, have a fresh kind of feeling in terms of our experience with God. And when that happens in our life, suddenly we begin to break free of those chains of fear and all that's kind of in front of us, and we can begin to move forward. As it comes to this podcast, in terms of our audience here at Breaking Barriers, I think this could be something negative. It could be something very positive. For example, you may be in a situation right now where you have the opportunity to acquire a new building or a new space. Maybe you have the opportunity right now to start a 3rd or a 4th service. Maybe there's a ministry that's right in front of you right now. You got people in your church that are getting fired up about chosen ministry, adoption, foster care. Maybe it's something to do with maybe a local pregnancy network, or maybe you're thinking about planting a church, and there's an opportunity that's in front of you that you feel like God is even kind of putting on your heart, leading you in, calling you to, and yet it's kind of scary. Maybe that 3rd service, you're not sure if it's going to fill up. Maybe the idea of planting a church is kind of tough because you're afraid of how many leaders are going to be sent out, or whatever it is. There's a wall right in front of us that we begin to come up against and think, man, I can't push through that. What do I need? Do I need to dig deeper? Or do I need to see something fresh in the presence of God, the character of God? Do I need kind of a fresh wind, fresh fire, so to speak? Maybe it's something negative. Maybe your church is facing a lawsuit. Maybe there's been a lot of unrest in a different ministry at your church where people are getting mad. Maybe there's people that are leaving. Maybe there's a decision that you need to make in regards to that. You need to do something that's hard. Maybe you need to let somebody go. Maybe you need to have a tough meeting with somebody who holds a lot of weight in your organization, in your church. I mean, I don't know what it could be. There's no way I could know. But what happens when we come up against something that we can't push through, yet God is calling us to? Well, guys, in Exodus chapter 4, I think Moses gives us a really good example of this. When he is called by the angel of the Lord in the burning bush, kind of that real iconic moment in the scripture. Honestly, I think that it may be one of the most iconic moments in all of Scripture. I still have burned in my mind sort of that image from Henry Blackaby's, his Experiencing God book and all that. I think many of us kind of have a lot of this in our background in terms of the story of this is one of those in the Old Testament that's right on par with anything else that we can remember. And the reason is because the angel of the Lord has spoken in, and he is speaking freedom and life over an enslaved people. We understand that God is taking a praising people to the promised land, but he's going to do it through his servant Moses, who prefigures Christ, and you guys are preachers, and you understand all this. Okay. But what does it mean for leadership, and what does it mean for us today? Well, if you guys, remember in this story, and I'm just going to kind of tell a little bit of it as we go, but in Exodus chapter 4, in the first verse, what we have is Moses coming up against that wall. I want you to go back to Egypt and tell Pharaoh to let him go and pull the people out, and the whole story that we understand from the book of Exodus. And the first excuse that Moses brings up is this excuse: they won't listen to me. That's his first excuse. They're not going to listen, God. Like he immediately he deflects the responsibility that God is putting in his life for a decision that's right in front of him. Man, are you going to trust God and walk in his pathway for you, his will for your life, or are you not? And of course, Moses is originally saying, no, I'm not going to do that. And the reason I'm not going to do that is because of them. There's something that is wrong with them. God, we're not going to plant that church because they won't be able to raise the money. Our people won't sign up for it. Our people won't go for it. God, we're not going to start that other service, even though our church is growing like gangbusters, because they're not ready for the taxing that it's going to take on them, in terms of our people and our volunteers, and it's going to be so hard and all of this kind of stuff. Or I'm not going to have that conversation with that leader, even though it's hard, because they that won't understand. People around them won't understand, and it's going to create a gossip train and X, Y, and Z. And the first thing that we see here for Moses is the impetus that we have in many times in leadership to point outward and say, well, the reason that I can't walk in God's calling of my life is because they are not going to listen and they are not going to follow. Of course, what we learn is that in each one of these three excuses that Moses brings up, God is not going to tell him to dig deeper. God is not going to tell him to build resiliency and courage and have a scary resiliency and a spine of steel. Instead, what God is going to do is he's going to show him something from his own character. He's going to present Moses with something that encourages. It puts courage in. It puts the steeled spine in. It puts the scary resilience in. And what God is going to do first here is he's going to tell Moses, okay, you think they won't listen, and really what you're saying is you don't think that I can convince them. That's the flip side of what Moses is saying here. If Moses says, I can't do what you're calling me to do because they're not going to listen, they're not going to believe, the flip side of that is saying, God, you can't convince them. You don't have the power to convince them. And so what does God do? And you guys know the story. In Moses' life, God ends up saying, well, let me convince you. Take that snake, grab it by the tail, right? And we all know, man, not the right way to grab a snake. I'm from North Florida. I've caught hundreds of snakes, been bitten many times. Okay, not by anything poisonous. You don't grab a snake by the tail. Hey, put your hand in your cloak. It comes out leprous. Put it back in your cloak. It comes out clean. Put your hand where you can't see. If you want to see the miracle, you're going to have to go into the darkness. You're going to have to trust me in a place that you can't see. And finally, he's going to end up telling him, if you know the story, take water from the Nile and pour it out, and when it hits dry ground, it'll turn to blood. Now, that's prefiguring what God is going to do later that convinces the people with the Nile turning to blood. But I think it's so interesting here how the third example, much like the first two, really pushes Moses to believe, then act, then see God move. That's what the definition of faith is. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things that are not seen. What do we want to do? Many times we want to say, God, if you will move, then I'll believe, then I will act. And that's not the ordering here. The ordering is you believe first, then you take action, then you see me move. And what he's doing here for Moses, I think, is saying, Moses, you are saying they won't believe, and I can't convince them. Oh, but I can. Because I am great and I'm omnipotent and I have power and I can do incredible signs, and I will move forward, and I would not call you to something that I'm not going to complete. So that excuse it's debunked. Keep walking in what I'm calling you to do. Okay, so Moses skips down in verse 10 and he gives another excuse, 2 of 3, and he says, oh my Lord, I am not eloquent, either in the past or since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and I am slow of tongue. So what we have first is, and this is so normative, I think, when it comes to leadership excuses, guys, there are things at Mercy Hill that we face. I don't want to make a decision. I'd rather land in indecision. They're hard. It's going to take work. Maybe it takes more than I got. It's fearful. There's courage that's needed that I don't have. And many times I have felt the need to move toward excuses. A lot of times the first excuse is about them. The second excuse is normally about us. It seems more humble, doesn't it? Well, not me, Lord. I don't have what it takes, and I don't have this, and I don't have that. And because of that, I'm not going to be able to walk in the calling that you have placed in my life in this area. We're not going to bust through that barrier because I don't have what it takes. And that sounds a little more humble, but it's not any more humble, because God is going to come back and he's going to use, I think, just a mic drop moment. It's a Job moment where he looks back at Moses and basically says, who has created man's mouth? Whether someone is blind, whether they are deaf, whether they are mute, who has created them that way? And yet the same God who has created you is calling you for the next steps in terms of his mission. I have a lot of, kind of empathy here, sympathy for Moses. He's saying, man, I got a slow mouth. I got a slow tongue. One of the translations for this, a way to translate it is to say he has a heavy mouth. And I think that's really funny. Just as a sports guy, it's funny when someone says, they have heavy feet. When you start playing sports, you start playing soccer, you start playing football, whatever. A lot of times people are athletic down the line, man, they can run a 40-yard dash and maybe they're even pretty good, but that's different than having light feet. Somebody that's got heavy feet, their feet get stuck in the ground. They can't move in quick motions. A lot of times they get tripped up. They're trying to do something in the backfield. They get tripped. That sniper in the sky, that invisible sniper gets them. The grass monster gets them, and they just fall down out of nowhere. It's kind of crazy because they have heavy feet. They get tangled up. They fall down. That's what Moses is saying here. I have heavy feet. My feet get tangled up. I fall all over myself when I'm trying to speak, and I don't have what it takes. And I don't know about you guys, but man, there have been many times where we were coming up against something in our organization where I thought to myself, I don't have what it takes. I don't have the courage. I don't have the leadership ability. I don't have the EQ. I don't have the smarts of another leader that I've seen. And that is a height, God. You're calling us into something. You're calling us to plant more churches. You're calling us to grow and take new ground in terms of campuses. You're calling us to make moves and prepare and get ready and make some hires and all that stuff. I don't have what it takes to move through that and do it well. And yet what we see God say here is so important. I mean, this is something I think we all need to remember today. Who has created man's mouth? In other words, Psalm 139 and Ephesians 2:10 are two verses that I think really go together. They're really opposite sides of the same coin. God has called you to some things, Ephesians 2:10, before the foundation of the world, but he has created you and knitted you together in your mother's womb. And if you think about those two things together, what you end up seeing is God has created you for what he will eventually call you for. Or you could say it in the negative. God wouldn't call you to that which he didn't create you for. And I think that there is a great peace that comes to us in that. God, it's about them. They won't. I can convince them. God, it's about me. I don't have what I need. Who do you think created you? I mean, I imagine how comical it would be for God. You know, if Moses says, well, I have a heavy mouth, and God is thinking, you think I didn't know that already? You think I didn't realize that? Of course I understand that. I know that you have that heavy mouth. Who do you think created that heavy mouth in you? And yet it is something I'm going to do through you for my glory. And man, it's a work that I have called you to. So 2 excuses of 3, man, it's about them. No, it's really not. It's about me. No, it's really not. And finally, in Exodus 4, many of us have come to this place. You know, it finally gets down to it. And Moses just says in verse 13, but he said, oh, my Lord, please send someone else. Okay, there it is. All right. It's like he finally just gets to the place where he's out of excuses and he just at the bottom of his heart, last excuse, last reason, if you want to put it that way, God, I just don't want to do this. I don't want to go through the pain of what it's going to take to remove that person. I don't want to go through the long hours that's going to take to convince all of our leaders that we need to give big at the end of this year. I don't want to go through all of the things that are going to be necessary for us to plant a church and losing leaders and sending people away and having to replace them. I just don't want to. And I think about for Moses here, man, it's like just from a leadership, this is not a sermon. This is not even a total exegesis. It's just thinking about some leadership principles, I think, in a way that we can look at Moses' life, who was an incredible leader. And I think sometimes it really is true. We can put it on them or we can put it on us, but at the end of the day, it's really just, man, do we want to or not? And again, God gives a fresh look at his character, a fresh fire here, a fresh renewing of his presence. What does he do? He actually, and many people I think get this wrong, what they say is, well, God sent Aaron as a punishment to Moses. Moses was supposed to go do this by himself. He sent Aaron because the Lord, it says the Lord, it ends up saying the Lord was angry with Moses because he didn't want to go. I think saying that Aaron is a punishment to Moses would be like saying the great fish was a punishment to Jonah. All right, the great fish is not a punishment. The great fish is grace. It's God saying, I am going to move heaven and earth to put you back in a situation to get back on track. God is the only one who can rebuild what looks irreparably broken. Okay, and it looks like there's no way. I'm going to send this great fish. Jonah, I'm going to put you back on the right path here. And I think he's doing that with Moses. In our life, we have a God who, when we don't want to, when we don't think we can, man, he sends a helper into our life. And what a beautiful picture that is of the eventual helper that will come at the end of the gospel message when Jesus said, it is better for me to go away so that I can send the helper to you, and he will comfort. What does the Spirit do? He will convince you of sin and righteousness. He will bring back the words of Christ. He will help turn our hearts to being ones who don't want to ones who do, because we remember God's love for us. So, guys, I don't know what it is that you're facing today, but I think about this passage and I think about the gospel implications for this passage, and I realize today that if Moses had any reason in the world to trust God after these 3 fresh kind of, fresh fillings, I guess you could say, of his character, of his presence, fresh revelations maybe is a better way to say it. Like, if Moses had good reason for himself to follow in God's footsteps, to follow his plan, to trust him, to get his heart on board, to get his desires straight, because God did these things in his life, then how much more do we, 2,000 years later on our side of the cross? I mean, think about it. Moses says, it's about them. They're not going to listen. And God says, I can convince them. Look at my power. Look at the snake. Look at your hand. Look at the Nile River. Guys, what do we have 2,000 years later? How much greater is the power of God to wake up Jesus and raise him from the dead? We have such an incredible, powerful signs that we have seen from God. Of course, this is a fresh revelation for us and should convince us, man, it's worth following God and worth doing whatever it is that he's putting in our hearts, starting that ministry, having that hard conversation, man, raising the money, spending the money. Can't tell you how many people I have talked to, man, that they're confused. They think that the greatest enemy of their church is running out of money. It's not. It's running out of growth. It's not growing. That's the greatest danger to the church. So sometimes churches are sitting on hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars, and they're not deploying them, even though they're not growing, they're not breaking through barriers. Man, if we want to have the courage to do that, look at what we have in terms of fresh revelations from God. Man, we don't have a hand that became clean. Our hearts became clean. So it's not about this. It's not about God's power to convince. I mean, we have a greater reason to be convinced. So it's not just about God can do that. Man, he can do it in our life in greater ways. Think about creation. What does God say to Moses? Like, hey, you need to be convinced in your own self. Who created man's mouth? God created us. But you know what, Christian, pastor, today, 2,000 years later, after the cross, he didn't just create you. He recreated you in the gospel. It wasn't just that you were made in his image. You were remade and now brought into the family because of the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And then think about, the things that we have in terms of, it's not just about them and it's not just about us. It's actually our own heart and our desires. And yet what we see is that Jesus Christ died on the cross. It's not just, man, that the Nile River was water and turned into blood. I mean, Jesus' blood sort of turned into a holy water that washed our sins away. And because of that, you and I have an opportunity to interact with the one that he sent, and that is the Spirit of God. The Comforter has come into our life. Man, we have greater reasons to want to knock down those walls that are in front of us. What Moses faced was scary. Leave a life that you've been living for 40 years, in your 80s, leave your family, go back to a place that wanted to kill you, and tell them to let all their slaves go. That's scary. You know what? We come up against some scary stuff too. Maybe your church is facing something that's really hard. Like I said, maybe there's something going on in terms of people wanting to leave. There's junk that's getting stirred up. There's a lawsuit. There's things like that. But are there steps that we need to take? And if we were not paralyzed by fear, we would take them. How do we get out of that? It's the Spirit of God. It's the fresh revelation of knowing that this same God who was prompting Moses prompts us, and his presence is a fear crusher. It is a courage instiller. It gives us that scary resilience that we need. Y'all, maybe there's a great opportunity that's in front of you. You're finally deciding to get into church planning. You're finally deciding, hey, man, this year we're going to do a big day. We're going to do a back to school weekend and we're going to make it awesome. And that's coming up. Or we're going to do a Christmas. We're going to do Easter. We're going to do a kids week. Maybe there's something with a new service like I mentioned that's coming up in front of you today. Okay, let's take those steps. Let's decide. That's the thing. We need to decide. We need to decide based on the goodness of God, his character. We need to decide that we're going to live on the edgy side of wise, that we understand stewardship is not about saving. Stewardship is about deploying. It's about risk. And man, let's take some steps in the direction that God is calling us. Hey guys, if this is new content for you, we'd love to invite you to our Facebook page. We have a private Facebook group that you can get on. If you just go to breakinggrowthbarriers.com, it'll take you, you'll have a link to get on that Facebook page. And we chop it up in all kind of practical church matters. Man, we're trying to see churches grow and go for the glory of God. And we'd love to see you on that page. Thanks.